It's packed with information, descriptions, and emotion. It defines how our character is perceived. But if we cut it wrong, our audience will get bored and go elsewhere. Welcome to Unscripted Dialogue Editing. No pressure. If you're editing any type of long-form content, if you're editing anything where a character is being interviewed and they're not working off a script, what we're going to do in this episode is for you. I'm going to outline the exact three-stage process pro editors use when taking thousands of words said to camera and crafting them into an exciting and dramatic arc. By the end of the episode, you'll have this process locked into your creative memory so that whatever you're cutting will be precise, intelligent, engaging, and incredibly well thought out. Let's start with a question. What is dialogue editing in unscripted filmmaking? Well, quite simply, it is our ability to take a long, uncut interview from the raw footage and weave it into a compelling and dramatic story. No B-roll, no music, no pacing, just words from our character and nothing else. Editing dialogue is one of the most ignored skills in editing. So often people tend to gravitate towards the fun or cool parts of our art form, like stylizing the cutting patterns or using emotional music. But here's the secret that is rarely spoken. Pro editors often use the dialogue to create the structure of their scenes. One of the fundamental differences between average editing and high-end editing is how the editor structures a scene. It's easy to cut to the beat and create a montage. It's easy to choose the music that fits the emotional tone of a scene. These are not unique creative skills because most people can do them pretty easily. They require little in the way of training. And so if these are your only skills, then you haven't created a high-end skill set. You haven't created value for yourself in the editing market yet. What is far less abundant in the editing world, a skill that directors, producers, and production companies can spot a mile off, is structure. How we craft the actual narrative in any sequence. And a huge percentage of this is built from the ground up by the dialogue. Think of the dialogue as the skeleton of a scene, the thing that holds everything together. If we were building a house, then these would be the foundational pillars within the structure before we put on the roof, the stairs, the curtain, and the carpets. Dialogue shapes structure and narrative. Every single word counts. Every single phrase we allow onto the timeline from the raw footage shapes the perception of that character. If we show this dialogue line to the audience, then they'll think one thing. And if we leave it out, they'll think something completely different. How they feel is based on what we show them. But here's the important point. It's not just what we allow the characters to say, it's the order in which we let them say it. And so if you want to take your dialogue and structure skill up to the next level and start creating Netflix or BBC documentary level cutting, start thinking about the following creative process. Okay, we can roughly categorize the unscripted dialogue editing process into three distinct stages. They are the pull, the cut down, and the rearrange. Each one of these requires a very distinct mindset, and each one is done for a very specific reason. So let's go through them. The sync pull is the initial process that we go through and literally pull out all the relevant dialogue lines from the raw interview footage. This basically means that anytime the character talks about something that we think the scene is about, we pull it out and put it down into our assembly sequence. Here's a really simple example. Let's say our scene is about how much Paddy loves coffee. Very true. Any area in the interview where Paddy is talking about coffee, how much he likes coffee, when he likes drinking his coffee, what is his favorite coffee, etc., 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 is going to be pulled out of the raw footage and cut into our assembly sequence. Now, in the middle of these coffee questions from the director, Paddy might start dropping in lines that are not related to coffee. His job, his family, his friends, his career, purple elephants, whatever. He's not an actor with a script. He's just a normal guy responding to questions from a director in an unscripted filmmaking environment. Now, all of these non-scene related answers are not going to be pulled from the raw footage and put in our assembly, or as you may have heard some editors say, we're going to leave them on the cutting room floor. They are not what the scene is about. They detract from what the scene is about. And so we don't want them in our assembly, in our sync pull. Once we've watched through all of the interview footage, we'll have pulled out, pretty much every single line that mentions what our scene is about. Paddy loves coffee. We'll have a very rough, very long, highly disordered sequence of every dialogue element that has been given to us by the character on this topic. So step 1 is complete. It's time for step 2. A very large part of the early stages of editing any scene is about cutting down to a watchable duration. If we didn't do this, filmmaking wouldn't exist, as every film would be about 50 hours long. We need to streamline and focus in on the very best answers from our character, and we need to get this assembly down into a much shorter time as possible. But there's a few problems in our way. As we know, unscripted characters are not actors working from a script. They're not media-trained celebrities or politicians who know how to answer in perfectly structured 30-second sound bites. They're not used to summarizing, and they often get nervous when a camera is pointed at them for the first time. Now, this in turn creates all kinds of issues. They mess up an answer. They repeat themselves. They go off on tangents mid-sentence that are not interesting or important or what the scene is about. They say things like and a lot, as well as a whole load of dialogue-based errors. So our job in the cut down is to take our assembly pull, go through it and cut out every kind of repetition error, every type of verbal mistake. Anytime the character repeats themselves, we have to choose the best version. Anytime they go off on a tangent or mess up mid-answer, that gets cut out and left on the cutting room floor. At the end of this pass-through, we've got a much shorter, error-free dialogue assembly at a much more watchable duration. Stage 2 is complete, but the next stage is where we see the difference between average editing and really highly skilled editing. Now, I struggled tremendously when I first entered professional editing suites back in the 1990s. It was like all of the producers and directors and execs were talking a completely alien language to me. If you're going to be working on high-end productions, you need to know all of the high-end creative terms used in our industry. And that's why I created this for you. the periodic table of editing terminology. 50 of the most used creative editing terms in a beautifully designed film poster for your edit suite. Just click on the link below and head on over to insidetheedit.com to download it right now. Now, the likelihood of an unscripted character structuring their answers in a perfect dramatic order is close to zero. Also, the likelihood of the structure we're trying to build is the exact same order that the questions were asked by the director in the original interview is also highly unlikely. Individual clips on our timeline will need to be reordered and repositioned based on our narrative structure and not the order of the interview. It's not uncommon for 2 interview clips on our timeline to be 5 or even 10 minutes apart in the raw footage. Our job is to rearrange the interview into the most intriguing, dramatic, and engaging structure possible. How we do this is vital to the impact of the story we're trying to tell. So here's a few of the important questions we need to ask ourselves right at this moment. What is the first line? What is the last line? What is the dramatic journey from the first to the last? Now, that last question is incredibly important. And a fantastic way to start planning this is what I call sync islands. Divide up the dramatic chunks of the story into these easily identifiable segments. Maybe there's 3 narrative sync islands in a scene. Maybe there's 6. The number doesn't matter. What matters is that each one is about an individual link in that narrative chain and that they all progress fluidly from one to the other. Now, these edit essays are theory-heavy episodes to describe the creative landscape and process of long-form editing. But if you want to see this process in action on the timeline, you can take a look at our Watch Me Edit episodes on our channel. Mastering these 3 stages of dialogue editing is an incredibly desirable skill to high-end clients. If you want your career to progress up the ladder to more prestigious films and productions, this skill is an absolute must. But here's the exciting prospect. Not many people have a very high level of skill in this area. With some hard work and practice, you can stand out in the crowded editing marketplace. Get going right now. The more high-end skills you've mastered, the more valuable you are to productions. Thank you for your kind attention, dear friend. My name's Paddy Bird, and this is Inside the Edit.